Good morning. How's it going this morning? I see that we've got some folks joining us. We'll just wait a few more minutes until it gets right out at about 10 o'clock and we'll get started, okay? Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started with some of the housekeeping things. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking and feel free to use the video. I like to see some video, so that's nice. Some of you are using video. And then ask questions in the chat. There will be some of us standing by ready to answer those questions in the chat during the presentation and after the presentation today. Yeah, and be respectful of others, which is not ever a problem in these. So let's go to the next slide. There are some resources that you may want to take a look at. You can visit our biology IT website. So that's biologyit.iastate.edu. And I just wanted to see, oh great, so they're getting put in the chat. The next one is Luggage Showcase. If you're interested in looking at websites that we've stood up in the Luggage platform, you can visit our showcase to see where those are and go ahead and check out some sites that are similar to yours. The websites there are you can filter them, and you can filter them by type, and you can also filter them by features. So if you're interested in looking at a certain feature, then you can filter them by those features. So for example, all the websites that have news, all the websites that have content cards, that kind of thing. Also, if you're interested in learning a little bit more in regards to how to do something, there's tutorials that you can find on luggagedocs.info, and there's a big red button on the homepage that links you to tutorials. And then finally, the Digital Access website, which is in the process of being updated. So it's not, I don't think is up to date yet as Dr. Riley is wanting it to be, but it's definitely got some great information. So feel free to check that out. Today's presentation is something that I think folks have really been excited about and asked about for quite a while, and it's going to be about website analytics. Josh Tenney is going to present today, so you don't have to listen to me today. I'm excited. You get to hear from someone else, and he is going to walk us through an introduction to kind of the important data to pay attention to in your analytics reports. So he'll be sharing in the report and dashboard and things like that to explain to us what's going on with reports. So I'm going to stop share and turn it over to Josh. So thank you, Josh, and welcome. I should say that those of you who don't know Josh, he has started working with our team, and he is a communications specialist. He specializes in content strategy, things like website analytics, determining where to place your content, how it should look, and drive information to specific audiences. He is excellent at all of those things. So if you haven't met him and you'd like to have a meeting with him, please feel free to email web support, and we will get you in touch with Josh. So thanks again, and we're excited to have him. So Josh.
All right, thank you, Anne. Let me get the report up here. So I am going to be going through, I'm going to use the Horticulture News Report. It's one of our highest traffic sites, and it should look quite similar to the reports that any of you with our websites receive every month. I do want to mention first that as a little bit more of an introduction to myself, that before I started here at Biology IT in January, before that I was a content editor just like many of you guys. I was helping to manage the Ag Online site for the Brenton Center in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. And so many of my concerns managing that site were very much the same ones that we'll be going through today. Just how to leverage your content, how to reach your audience. That's really the goal here. It's not just driving up the analytics numbers, not usually at least. I do want to mention before we start, even though I'll be going through most of the important ones, that there is a glossary of analytics terms. If somebody wants to post that in the chat, that would be great, but it's extremely helpful because even if I tell you these now, it's easy to forget them. They're reasonably technical at times. So, all right, so I'll sort of be reviewing some of the basic vocabulary and features on the report, but I'll also be trying to offer up ways that you can interpret sort of the interesting metrics. The metrics and analytics should be sort of a guide to future content development. They're not the end-all be-all. They're not necessarily a grade on how you've done, but sometimes they can give you interesting information on how to modify your website going forward. Before we dive in, I just urge you to sort of think about your goals for your website. Traffic isn't always the most important outcome. Surely it's an important metric for nearly anything that you're going to do with your site, but try to think about if you're managing a site where your goal is actually to register more students for your program, or to get people to off-site to look at some publications, or to view a specific news item, any of those things. Just try to think about what your actual goal is and how these metrics may or may not be in service to that specific goal. So, how do you find the number of people who visited your site? This is going to be the beginning and the big overview of the visits on your page. So for Hort News, the visit summary, we've got a nice graph here that's showing how this month, because we are just looking at the month of March 2019 for this report, how this month compares to previous months. So there's been some mountains and valleys. It's tough to say how important those are in the overall scheme of things, but they do give you an idea of, that there is sort of a pattern. So first you'll look at unique visitors. Unique visitors is the number of individual users who visited the page. The way that contrasts from visits is that a unique visitor might visit the page more than once. So when you're looking at unique visitors, this is usually the metric that you guys are reporting on a yearly basis. So if you're reporting website data to a department chair, for example, this is where you start. You'd collect the traffic analytics for the unique visits each month of every year, each month of the full year, and add them together for your report. As I said, visits are just individual visits. They can be the same user visiting multiple times, but they give you an idea of how many times your site was visited in total for this month, in this case, March. The actions are the links that are taken, or the actions that are taken on the site by any visitor during any visit. And here I'll just show you the exact definition for that. The number of actions performed by visitors can be views, internal site searches, downloads, or outlinks. So that includes a variety of behaviors. The maximum actions in one visit, not always the most relevant thing, but it tells you that somebody who visited this site did perform 96 actions in a single visit, which is quite a bit, but the average actions per visit, which is what you're looking at here, is 1. That may or may not be a bad thing. It just depends on what kind of site you're using here. For a news site like Hort News, like what we're looking at here, I would say that's not incredibly surprising. Somebody might click a link to a specific article, read that article, and then they're done. The average visit duration, 35 seconds, same sort of thing. Maybe that's not a great number. Maybe it's a fantastic number for you. For a news site, that might be all it takes for them to get through the article. And bounce rate. Bounce rate is definitely not self-explanatory. It tells you what percentage of visits only viewed one page on the site before they left. So they didn't go anywhere else. And again, this is something that you have to interpret. It's very much the same as the others. For a news site, I don't think 90% is an incredibly shocking number. They came to read the article, and they read the article, and they exited the site. Not necessarily a bad thing, but a lot of times people are trying to get this number down, especially if they have other goals that they want people to move through the site, because this indicates that they showed up and left. So I guess I should scroll back up here and mention, I said this a little bit at the beginning, but this is a good place to look for patterns. If you are getting specific peaks during specific seasons and you want to do something like send out an email blast that's going to reach people, you might want to time it when there's a lot of people that tend to come visit the site anyway. That must be the peak interest in your site. If on the other hand, you really wish that these valleys had a little bit more traffic during them, maybe you want to time something there so you can get those numbers up during that time if you're trying to keep continued engagement throughout the year. But again, those things are just related to what goals you specifically have. So moving on to device type. This doesn't always seem like it's going to be the most important metric to you. All you're really looking at here is what kind of device people were performing these various metrics with. So this is the number of visits on a smartphone. This is the number of visits on a desktop, tablet, phablet, so on. Phablet being a sort of in-between tablet and phone in size. As you can see, the things across the top are pretty much the same. There's revenue here at the end, which is irrelevant. We can ignore that. But it's the same metrics we saw on the last page. The thing I would draw your attention to here is that you can use this interpretation a little bit. When you look at this, you see that actually smartphone visits outpace desktop visits by quite a bit. That means this site is being viewed, and I don't have a pie graph here, and maybe I should start including one in these reports, but that well over 50% of visits are on a mobile device and not on a desktop. If up until now you've been mainly reviewing your website's appearance on a desktop computer, you are not looking at the site in the same way as the majority of your audience. And this metric can help you realize that. So if you've mainly concerned yourself up until now with the way that your page looks for a desktop, and you're not really focused on if it looks exactly how you want it to look on a mobile device, you're not necessarily catering to your users here. So I advise on a website like this, where you're seeing metrics like this, to when you're publishing something important then that you're going to try to promote, you go and you look at that you look at it on a device that your average user is actually using. Granted, most of our sites, it should display well. That's one of the primary goals that we have when we develop sites and stand up sites for everybody. But each individual piece of content always looks a little bit different. So that's how I would interpret data like this if I saw something like this. So that's just one way you can use this data that maybe you don't think is important right away to something that actually makes a pretty big difference. Similarly, browsers, it would be harder for me to draw many conclusions about this on a site like we're looking at, but this reinforces some of the data that we saw on the previous page. Mobile Safari is the default browser for iOS devices, so you are seeing a lot of grouping around that. Chrome Mobile is pretty high. So really reflecting similar data to what we saw before. But if you were concerned about looking at the various ways people are viewing your site, there can be differences between browsers. So if you want to make sure it looks good in all of these, then you know which ones to prioritize. Visits by days of the week. So in this case, again, we're still looking at the same things across the top as we did on that original page. Just glancing through these numbers, we can see things are pretty even across the weekdays, with a little bit of a spike on Saturday and Sunday. I might use this to influence something like an email campaign, or if I was scheduling new posts on social media. If I know that the majority of people or at least that there's a spike in the activity on my site on the weekends, I might time the releases of things like emails and social media posts on the weekends when people are a little bit more likely to visit my site and engage with the kind of content I produce. It's not a huge jump in this case, but sometimes things like that can help. Otherwise, most of the metrics are staying steady. And again, we can ignore conversion rate here. That's a specific thing for Hort News, but won't apply to most of the sites that you guys are using. Actions. So we'll be breaking these down as we go along. These are sort of a sum total, but we see several of the same things, page views and unique page views for the month, but we also start seeing downloads. Unique downloads follows the same rule as page views and unique page views. So these are actual files downloaded on your site, and these are the unique ones. So this means that this number being larger means that several of these were downloaded by the same user multiple times, multiple downloads by the same user. Unique outlinks, outlinks being when somebody clicks a link on your site to visit another site, you get to collect that data, and I'll go into the value of that a little bit later. Searches, these are internal searches on your site. That's referring to people using the search bar at the top to look for content on your site. Unique keywords. I'm not sure how much we get into that later in this, but again, it's always handy. I use Control F to look through this, and no unique keywords. We don't get into that later in the page, so I'll leave that one alone for now. Page URLs. Make sure I've got my right page here. This is where you start to see the real behavior of your visitors, and the behavior of visitors is really important. As you can see, we're still looking at the same actions at the top here. There is a couple new ones. Exit rate is the percentage of users that upon reaching this page leave the site entirely. And average generation time, this is more of a performance metric. This is how long it took the page to render. It includes our servers generating it and the complete download of the site on the user's end. Most of these look fine. If you saw something that was really, really out of whack here, it would be good to report it probably to us, because this is something that we would concern ourselves with more than you will, and we can track down why there's a really high number if it's taking people a really long time to load that site. But these are all pretty good. So here we're seeing the actual URL of the page views. And for Hort News, we're seeing a lot of different articles. We're seeing a couple things that are actual pages that are kept up to date, for like the FAQ. This would be the home page, scale insects. But what's interesting here is that we're seeing the most visited page is actually a page from, as you can see, an article from 1994, and it's marked PH. And just for sort of the interest of looking at an outlier like this, because a lot of our sites are going to have outliers in traffic, let's open this up and look at what it is. And you can do just by clicking directly on any of these. So if you don't remember from the URL, click it and go find out what it is that people are visiting. So this is how to change your soil's pH. And I've actually talked with the Hort News team about this page and noticing that it was getting a lot more traffic than other things on their site. And we'll see more data about this page later, but if you realize that an overwhelming majority of people, or at least a disproportionate number of people are landing on a specific page on your site, it might be in your interest to put things on that page that keep people on the site, because as you can see, the exit rate for this page is 99%. So 99% of the people that land on this page leave immediately after. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. Maybe they found exactly what they were looking for. They have no more use to move around the site. But if it's somebody that might be interested in the rest of the content on the site, then obviously we'd like to keep them there. So it might be good to have related content, which we do over here, more content generated that's relevant to the content we're seeing here. And we've got tags at the bottom that allow people to, or categories that allow people to see others like this. That's just one way you can start to sort of use the information that is in the outliers. So even if it's one page that's getting a lot of attention, you can leverage that. And leveraging the pages that are the most visited is something that can be really useful to increasing how long people stay on the site and how often they perform maybe the other actions that are relevant to your goals with the site. The next area is your entry pages. And this is related in that it's where people are actually landing for the first time on your site. And when you see something like this for Hort News, you're getting the idea that most people that arrive on the site do not arrive on the home page. So this helps us sort of establish our mental model for what users are doing on the site. I know that I tend to, and I imagine many of you imagine your site being used from the home page. That's the starting point. That's where everybody's going to go first. But this sort of gives you the truth of the matter, which is that that's not typically the case, at least for this site. You have to imagine what it's like for a user who lands here first, because this is also the same page at the top. This is the most common entry page. If they wanted to go on elsewhere in the site, how easy is it for them to do so? How easy is it for them to understand what else if this site has other things they're interested in? I think the Hort News page does a pretty good job, but it's something you want to consider if people are entering a specific page on your site that is not your home page. It's why navigation of your site from all places is important and not just from that sort of top level home page. Entry page titles is really the same data. It just helps if you wanted to see exactly where what the names of those pages are rather than the URLs, which aren't always informative. But for Hort News, some of the URLs are informative. They tell you that there's actually quite a range of different dates and years that are being accessed, and also giving you the option to click directly to those. But if you just want the titles, this is where you look at it. I won't spend too much time there. Exit pages. So this is the same idea of the entry pages. This is people who, after viewing the page, exited the site. So we're seeing the same page at the top here because so many of them exit the site after viewing it. But if there's so many ways to interpret this information, so if it sounds a little overwhelming, that's okay. Really, you're just trying to put yourself in the place of the audience and give your best thought as to why people are exiting the pages after reading these things. Now, as I said before, for a site like Hort News, that's probably because they read the information that they came to read. They got here from a search, especially in the case of PH. They saw exactly what they wanted to find, and they left. And again, if your goal is to serve your users information, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So if people are exiting as soon as they see your homepage, that's not necessarily as good. But as you can see, their homepage here has a lower exit rate than many of their pages. So people are continuing on when they see that page. But if people were leaving right away, then it implies that the homepage isn't really giving them either what they expected or the navigation they need to reach the information that they want on your site. So try to give some consideration when you see the exit rates for pages that you don't want people to exit after they've seen. Exit page titles is the same thing, just with a more helpful presentation of the actual page titles on the left-hand side here. This is more breakdown by page. This is the same as the earlier one that's just showing the traffic for each page by title. Outlinks. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier on the actions page, but this gives you an idea of URLs that people are clicking on your site that are going to a specific page outside of that site. Here we're not seeing necessarily the kind of things that you might be looking for, but if you were guiding somebody to a store to purchase something on a different site, or you're guiding someone to a publication of a research paper that you wrote and you want to track that information, you want to know how many people are actually going to see that, this is where you see that information, because it's not going to be grouped with the other pages because it's not on your site. if your idea of conversions or of reaching your goal for the site is getting people to read your research papers, this is where you want to look for it. You'll see those links to the outside pages. If it's a PDF rather than a link to another site, you'll see it down here in downloads. So this is the actual downloads that people are committing to on your site for individual files. In this case, it's a lot of images, but if you provide PDF information or even programs or anything that needs to be completely downloaded, this is where you're going to see that information and get an idea for the month of how many people did those downloads. And again, we're seeing the same distinction, unique downloads versus downloads. So for this file, it was downloaded 6 more times by users who had already downloaded it once before. And I know I'm kind of rushing through this, so hopefully if anybody has questions, we'll get to some of those. Channel type. What did visitors use to reach your page? So this is a broad look at what kind of medium people use to get to your page. In the case of Hort News, it is overwhelmingly search engines. This means really focusing on how your pages might appear to a search. In some cases, it might help you decide if you need to promote something that you want to run Google Ads, if Google is the most likely way for people to find you. Direct entry means that people are visiting URLs directly. If I send you a URL to your email and you click it and follow to the page, then you would be considered a direct entry to the site. Social networks, fairly self-explanatory, a link on social media. Those are going to come up here. Other websites, if you're on a different website and you click to visit the page, that's here. I should go back and mention direct entry. I mentioned email for a reason. If you want a broad idea of how your emails are performing when you're trying to get people to come to your site, direct entry is a good place to look at because you can sort of infer that if you're getting a high number there, they probably came from your direct email. And campaigns, this will only happen if you've tied something into Matomo generally that's tracking a specific advertising campaign or otherwise. So that's not going to apply for most of you. And last page of your report, we're going to talk a little bit about the websites. So these are the websites that are linking to your pages. So you can see exactly where certain visitors are coming from. When visitors come here from the Iowa Gardener, you get an idea of what those visitors do. The visitors from that site, there's been 175. They perform 223 actions, 1 action per visit, and they tend to bounce out of the site on that first page 86% of the time. If you know that you get a specific kind of traffic from a specific site, so if you're a program and you want people to enroll in your program and you know you're linked from admissions, then this would be a good place to look at the behavior of that specific group of people that's coming from admissions, because that's probably your target audience. I know there's a good example here of, we can see that people who visit from Home Horticulture Resource and Extension, they are performing a huge number of actions, and they are staying on the site for much longer than other users. I'm not the owner of the site, so I don't have a great interpretation as to why that user base is doing that. But if you're the site owner, you might, and maybe you want to leverage that, or maybe you want to discount that. Because now is a good time to mention that because the content creators like you are mobile and can come from so many different IPs, we can't necessarily filter out the traffic that comes from the content creators like you. So if one page shows a huge outlier and it's one you've been working on constantly, it might be some of your own traffic that's bleeding into that information. And there's not really a good way to filter that out with the many IPs in use on campus. But that's basically the report. So I do want to mention that even though this is the bulk of the data in the report, this is not all of the data that's being collected on your site. This is just what we send you because it's some of the sort of top level, more valuable information. Here, I want to pull over another page for Hort News. This is the dashboard that we can see for them. Can everybody see this in front? I'm not, okay, it did not come across that way. Maybe I can do this. There we go. Now can everyone see it? Cool. Ririk says yes. All right. So this is a good example of something that we don't include in the report. It's not valuable to everyone, but it is extra data that we collect. This is the visitor map. We can see a broad sort of density map of where the visitors for this month came to Hort News. Unsurprisingly, 75% of all the visits came from the United States, but we can see that all of these countries that have any blue in them at all had at least a couple unique visitors, or at least one unique visitor for the month. If you are trying to reach international students or an international group in particular, this might be valuable to you, and it might be something we can include in your data. But just really, this is to let you know that there's more data out there. If there's something that you really specifically want to know and it's not in your report, let us know, and it might be something we can include in future reports.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Josh. And we did have one question that came in before we got started, and it was a great question. So yes. If you have a moment, I'd be if you want to stop share, I'm happy to share my screen for a brief minute to help answer this question. So let's see here. I just share everything. So anyway, okay. The question was, can I get a report for specific pages on my site? And this situation is specific to IPM. So if I go visit the IPM website here at Iowa State and go to the homepage, we can see that there's a Protect Iowa Crops section of this website. And there are pages that pertain specifically to Protect Iowa Crops. So if I select more news, for example, you can see the Protect Iowa Crops news, because this is from the Protect Iowa Crops page and specific to them. You can also see that the URL path has Protect Iowa Crops in it. We can pull a report of all of the pages with a specific URL path to have a monthly report sent to you. So if you're interested in your certain pages with a URL path, we can certainly do that. And we've done that for Protect Iowa Crops now. So when we create these reports, it looks something like this. This is on our side of things. We can go in and have a specific segment created. So if I go to the dashboard, this is something that you could have access to if you wanted, if you're interested in seeing more content, data, and all of the information versus just the report. We can help you with that. Essentially, what that means is that you could go over here instead of all visits for the site and select a specific area. So if your website, if you had a couple sections on your website, then you could migrate to a specific area and see that section. And these pages started in 2018. So that's why this graph looks the way it does. And you can choose how many months that you want to see for that graph as well. But that would give you a dashboard and allows us to give you a report for certain pages. And I've done that. So for example, with this person, we just sent an email for the January, February, and March reports for this section. We have another question. Okay, does that help answer the question, Anne, about where you can find, I guess the first question is there a place on our websites where we can find monthly analytics reports? And the answer is no, because the system that's collecting the reports is separate from the website. There's code that's placed on the website. So if you were interested in having access to this dashboard, for example, that you can see on my screen for your website, we can give that to you, and then you could bookmark that link and be able to visit information about those pages. Yes, and then if you wanted to have tailored reports for specific areas, like I just mentioned, then we could certainly help you with that. Are there any other questions for today? Okay, big thank you to Josh for stepping in and doing a great presentation this morning. Really excited, and it's awesome to have more folks involved in his expertise in the analytics area. So please reach out to us at websupport@iastate.edu if you have any further questions, and we're more than happy to assist. Have a good day. See you guys later.